September 11th, 2001, began like any other Tuesday morning in New York City. Commuters rushed to work, children headed to school, and the great machinery of American life hummed along as it had for generations. The twin towers of the World Trade Center stood majestically against the clear blue sky, symbols of American prosperity and strength. But in a matter of hours, this ordinary day would become the most extraordinary tragedy in American history.
Inside the Twin Towers, nearly 50,000 people worked each day. Bankers, traders, insurance agents, restaurant workers, maintenance staff. They came from every corner of the globe, representing the melting pot that is America. These were ordinary people living ordinary lives, with families waiting at home, dreams for the future, and no idea that this Tuesday would test the very limits of human courage. At 8:46 in the morning, American Airlines Flight 11, carrying 92 people, slammed into the North Tower between floors 93 and 99. The sound was deafening. Debris rained down onto the plaza below. At first, many thought it was a terrible accident. A small plane, perhaps, that had lost its way in the morning haze. But that illusion would be shattered just 17 minutes later. Within minutes of the first impact, the first responders were mobilizing. Fire companies from across the city raced toward Lower Manhattan. They didn't know they were rushing into the largest rescue operation in New York City's history. These men and women didn't hesitate. They ran toward danger, while everyone else ran away. It's what they had sworn to do, what they had trained to do. But on this day, their courage would be tested beyond imagination. Captain John Martinez of Ladder Company 1 was a 20-year veteran firefighter with kind eyes and steady hands. He had fought fires for 2 decades, pulled people from burning buildings, rescued children from smoke-filled apartments, and saved countless lives. But he'd never faced anything like this. As his fire truck screamed through the streets toward the World Trade Center, he looked at each of his men and told them to remember their training. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and bring everyone home. He had a wife and 3 children waiting for him, but he also knew that somewhere in that burning tower, people were waiting for rescue. At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower between floors 77 and 85. The explosion was massive, sending a fireball across the sky. Now everyone knew this was no accident. America was under attack. But even as the second plane hit, the rescue efforts intensified. Fire Chief Robert Caldwell set up a command post in the North Tower lobby, coordinating what would become the largest emergency response in the city's history. In the stairwells of both towers, ordinary people became heroes. Sarah Chen, a 34-year-old mother of 2 who worked on the 78th floor of the South Tower, found herself helping an elderly colleague named Mr. Peterson.
Port Authority Police Officer David Kim had been with the force for 8 years. His beat was usually mundane, checking IDs and directing traffic in the World Trade Center complex. But on this morning, he became a guardian angel for dozens of people trying to escape the towers. When he spotted a woman who had fallen, injured by falling debris, he ran to her aid without hesitation, shielding her with his own body as more debris fell around them. He coordinated evacuations, shouted directions through his megaphone, and put his own life at risk again and again to help others reach safety.
Michael Torres was a 42-year-old executive at a financial firm on the 84th floor of the South Tower. He coached Little League on weekends and never missed his children's school plays. When the second plane hit, he found himself trapped above the impact zone with a group of colleagues. He managed to call his wife Maria one last time, telling her he loved her and the kids before the call cut out. But even facing the unthinkable, he didn't give up. He rallied his colleagues, telling them they had to keep trying, that there had to be a way out. He was an ordinary father who found himself in extraordinary circumstances, showing courage in the face of the impossible. As firefighters climbed upward through the stairwells, civilians descended past them, the stairwells filled with smoke, but everyone moved with purpose and dignity. Firefighter Tommy Sullivan, just 28 years old and only 3 years on the job, carried an injured woman named Elizabeth Morgan down 30 flights of stairs, refusing to leave her behind. He told her his name, asked about hers, and kept her talking and conscious during the long descent. She would later say he was her angel, the young man who saved her life when she thought all hope was lost. Throughout both towers, acts of heroism unfolded by the hundreds. Office managers helped evacuate entire floors. Security guards went back up to check for stragglers. Maintenance workers led people through alternate routes they knew by heart. People who had never considered themselves heroes discovered reserves of courage they never knew they possessed. They made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death, not just for themselves, but for others. Then, at 9:59 a.m., the unthinkable happened. The South Tower began to collapse. In 10 seconds, 110 stories of steel and concrete pancaked down upon themselves. A building that had stood for 28 years was reduced to rubble. Hundreds of people were still inside, including dozens of first responders who had climbed up to help. The collapse sent a massive cloud of dust and debris rolling through the streets like a tsunami, and people ran for their lives, covered in ash and debris. Sarah Chen had escaped the South Tower just minutes before it collapsed. From a nearby building, she watched as the place where she had worked for 5 years disappeared in a cloud of dust.
Even as one tower fell, the rescue efforts continued. Emergency workers emerged from the dust cloud like ghosts, covered head to toe in gray ash, but they didn't stop. They immediately began searching for survivors. Officer Kim, now covered in dust and breathing heavily, coordinated with other first responders, calling for search and rescue teams. These first responders had just witnessed something that defied comprehension, but they didn't retreat. They regrouped and kept working.
Captain Martinez and his crew were still in the North Tower when the South Tower collapsed. They continued their ascent, though they now knew the gravity of the situation had changed dramatically. His men were exhausted, carrying heavy equipment up dozens of flights of stairs in thick smoke, but they didn't complain. When one of his younger firefighters asked if they should fall back, Captain Martinez told him firmly but kindly that there were people up there who needed them, and they didn't become firefighters to run away from fires. He knew the risks. He had a family waiting at home, but he also knew that somewhere above him, people were waiting for rescue. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. Another 110 stories disappeared in seconds, sending another massive cloud of debris and dust across lower Manhattan. In the span of less than 2 hours, both towers of the World Trade Center had been reduced to rubble. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day, including 343 firefighters, 37 Port Authority police officers, and 23 New York Police Department officers. Captain Martinez was among those who never made it home. What had once been a symbol of American prosperity and strength was now ground zero. But even in this devastation, the American spirit endured. Rescue workers from across the country converged on New York City. For days, they searched through what they called the pile. Firefighters, police officers, construction workers, volunteers worked around the clock, sleeping a few hours and then returning to search for survivors. They called out constantly, hoping to hear a voice calling back from beneath the debris. Steve Murphy, a 45-year-old construction worker, took 2 weeks off from his regular job to volunteer at Ground Zero. He worked 16-hour days, refusing payment, saying it was the least he could do. His brother had been a police officer, and Steve knew he would have been one of the first ones into the towers. Workers like Steve came from all over the country, bringing their skills and their hearts to the recovery effort. He operated his excavator with incredible precision, moving massive pieces of steel and concrete as delicately as if they were made of glass.
Throughout the city, medical staff treated the injured and the exhausted. Dr. Anna Reeves worked on firefighter after firefighter who had inhaled massive amounts of dust and debris. When she told them they needed to rest, that their lungs needed time to heal, they protested that they couldn't rest while people were still missing, that they had to go back. She had to tell them firmly that the best thing they could do for those people was take care of themselves, because they couldn't help anyone if they collapsed.
The hospitals also became gathering places for families, searching for their loved ones. Photos of missing people covered every available wall surface. These walls of missing persons became shrines of hope and desperation. Families clung to the possibility that their loved ones might be found alive, trapped but breathing, somewhere in the debris. A wife posted a picture of her husband, a businessman who worked on the 95th floor, asking anyone who would listen if they had seen him. A father posted a picture of his daughter, a young woman who worked as a restaurant server in the towers and was planning to start nursing school the next month. The search and recovery operation continued for months. Workers carefully sorted through debris, treating every piece as potentially containing someone's loved one. When they found human remains, work stopped. Everyone removed their hard hats. The remains were carried out with dignity and respect. Every person found was treated with honor. It didn't matter if they were a CEO or a custodian, a firefighter or an office worker. Each life had value. Each person had been someone's entire world. Firehouses throughout the city became places of mourning and remembrance. The firehouse that Captain Martinez called home now served as a memorial, with his photo, his helmet, and messages from the community. His fellow firefighters read letters from people who had never met him but wanted to thank him for being a hero. One letter was from a parent whose daughter went to school with Martinez's son, saying the boy was the bravest kid in the class, just like his father. The fire department lost 343 members that day, the largest loss of life in their history. Officer David Kim was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His partner spoke at his memorial service about how Kim was the kind of cop who knew everyone's name on his beat. The hot dog vendor, the parking garage attendant, the office workers rushing to catch their train. He made
Sarah
everyone
Chen
feel safer
couldn't bring
just by
herself
being
to
there.
work in a tall building again.
His widow
after
established
her
a
escape
scholarship
from the
fund
South Tower.
for children
She
of
became a
first
teacher
responders,
instead, saying she
ensuring that
wanted
his
to help
legacy
build the
would
future
live on
rather than
in the
just
lives he
manage
saved
finances.
and the family
When
he
her
left
young
behind.
children asked her about the towers,
Survivor's
she
guilt
chose her
affected
words carefully,
thousands of people who
explaining
escaped the
that
towers.
some very bad people
They struggled
had hurt
with the
the
randomness
building
of survival,
and the people inside.
with the knowledge that their
but there were
lives had been
also very
spared
good people
while others
who
perished.
tried to help everyone get out safely. When her son asked if they were like superheroes, she smiled through her tears and said, yes, they were real superheroes.
The cleanup took nearly 9 months. Workers removed 1.8 million tons of debris, but they did so with care and reverence, knowing this was sacred ground, and that mixed in with the steel and concrete were the remains of nearly 3,000 people. Throughout this process, the stories of heroism continued to emerge. Stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary choices in moments of crisis. Maria Martinez, Captain Martinez's widow, visits his grave regularly with their 3 children. Their son Tommy followed in his father's footsteps and became a firefighter, working at the same firehouse where his father served for 20 years. Above his locker hangs a photo of Captain Martinez and the 6 other members of Ladder Company 1 who died on September 11th. When people ask Maria what kind of man runs into a burning building, she tells them her husband was just a man who cared more about others than himself. Today, where the Twin Towers once stood, the 9/11 Memorial features 2 reflecting pools in the exact footprints of the original towers. Water flows continuously into these square voids, representing the lives lost and the absence their deaths created. Around the edges of these pools, the names of all 2,977 people who died are inscribed in bronze. The memorial has become a place of pilgrimage, where people from around the world come to pay their respects and to remember. The new One World Trade Center rises into the sky, taller and stronger than the original towers. But the most important memorial isn't made of steel and glass. It lives in the 9/11 Memorial Museum, where school children walk through exhibits, learning about the heroes of that day. When students ask their teachers why those people tried to save others, even when it was so dangerous, the answer is simple: because that's what heroes do. They don't think about the danger to themselves, they think about the people who need help. This is perhaps the most important lesson of September 11th. Heroes aren't born, they're made in moments of crisis. They're ordinary people who make extraordinary choices when the world needs them most.
The
heroes
legacy of
Ground
September
Zero didn't
11th
set
lives
out to
on
be
in a new
heroes that
generation
morning.
of first responders.
They were just people
young
doing
men
their
and
jobs,
women who chose
living their
careers in
lives,
service because
going
they
about
were
their daily
inspired by the
routines.
heroes of that day.
But when their
At
city needed
firehouses
them,
throughout New York
when their
City,
neighbors
the
needed
daily
them,
routine
when
continues,
strangers needed
but
them,
every firehouse still displays
answered
photos of the
the
members
call.
they lost on 9/11. Young firefighters who weren't even born when the attacks happened now serve because of the stories they heard about the courage shown that day.
23 years have passed since that September morning when the world changed forever. The physical wounds have healed, the towers have been rebuilt, life has moved forward, but the memories remain and the lessons endure. When parents bring their children to the memorial and explain what happened, they're not just teaching about tragedy, they're teaching about the capacity for good that exists in ordinary people when extraordinary circumstances demand it. The heroes of 9/11 remind us that heroism isn't about having superpowers or being fearless. It's about having the courage to act when action is needed, to help when help is required, to stand up when others cannot. They showed us the very best of human nature in humanity's darkest hour. Captain Martinez, Officer Kim, Sarah Chen, Tommy Sullivan, Michael Torres, and thousands of others like them proved that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the light of human goodness can still shine bright. Their legacy isn't just in the memorial that bears their names or the rebuilt towers that pierce the sky. Their legacy lives in every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every time someone chooses to help rather than to harm. They showed us who we can be at our best. They showed us what it means to be human. We will never forget September 11th, 2001. We will never forget the 2,977 people who died that day. And we will never forget the heroes who ran toward danger so that others might live. Their courage echoes through the ages, reminding us that in our darkest moments, the human spirit can rise to meet any challenge. They are the heroes of Ground Zero, and their story is the story of America at its finest hour.